All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Katherine Johnson. I'm with the Richmond Hill Bryan County Chamber of Commerce, and we are excited to welcome you back to our virtual Grits and Government series. This is our first one back after Thanksgiving. We hope y'all had a wonderful week. Hopefully, you were able to see family, whether that was in person or virtually. I know this year was a little different, but we are glad to have y'all back for the rest of our series. Just to kind of give a brief overview before we get started, today we are hearing from Representative Ron Stevens. On Thursday, we will hear from Congressman Buddy Carter. And then next week, we will hear from the Georgia Economic Development Authority and Georgia Ports Authority. And then our last call next Thursday will be Representative Jesse Petrie. So we are excited as we finish out this series. As always, we are recording this call. So if you either have to step away or you have someone that you want to listen in, we will have it up on YouTube later on today, which is where all of our other calls are as well if you want to go back and watch the rest of the series. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our guest. Representative Stevens represents the 164th District in the Georgia House of Representatives and is a graduate of Armstrong State University and Mercer University. Representative Stevens has been a pharmacist for over 30 years, and during his time in elected office, he has served on several committees and subcommittees, and currently, I believe, chairs the Economic Development and Tourism Committee. He and his wife Janice have 2 daughters, 2 grandsons, and 1 granddaughter. I don't know if that's changed or not recently. 3 now. Is that correct still? Well, good. Well, Ron, Representative Stevens, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to speak with us on some of our priorities for the 2021 legislative committee and session as y'all go into that this next year. I also want to congratulate you on your reelection. We're excited to see what you're able to do in this next little while that you're in office. You've always been a great partner to Bryan County, and we appreciate that. So at this time, I will turn it over to you. Just so everyone knows, we did our community partners have come up with our priorities for our representatives for the new year, for the new session. And so we've shared that with them as they present on these calls. So Ron, I will turn it over to you. And then after that, we'll have any questions. I'll read those out to you.
Sure. Thank you, Catherine. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you.
I sure can.
Thank you all for allowing me to come in and do this virtual. I hope your breakfast is delicious. And again, I want to thank you all for just allowing me to serve you for all these almost 2.5 decades. First, wanted to give you an update, and I know there's going to be lots of questions about the elections and the recount. You need to know that the governor has, and I spoke to him yesterday for quite some time, that the governor has requested that the absentee ballots, specifically and only the absentee ballots, be checked for validity. Of course, that he has no authority over the Secretary of State. He's a statewide elected office, but the governor has requested that in writing, sent him a letter, and has made it pretty clear that he wants to make sure that these elections are held above board, transparent, etc. So just so that everybody knows that. Want to kind of give you, last year was a very interesting time. We started second Monday in January, as we typically do. We got through crossover day, which is the time that you have to have a bill from the House and the Senate to cross over for it to be considered for that legislative year. Well, COVID came along, lots of problems that emerged very rapidly and made it very, very difficult for us to do our business. So we adjourned in March, or we didn't adjourn, we actually took a recess. And we came back in May. And at that time, it was incredibly difficult because of distancing, as you might imagine. We all sit next to each other, both in the House and Senate, so we had to spread out. We had folks in the gallery. We limited access for people coming in, and we had folks in the rules room so that they could spread out. And of course, it took as much as 20 minutes just to take one vote, which typically takes less than a minute after you're in the session and the bell is rung, because everything had to be done by hand. So it was difficult. We made it through. We balanced our budget, which is the constitutional thing, the only thing that we have to do. And we're limited in the number of bills that we were going to consider. I had a constitutional amendment that passed unanimously out of the House that didn't get even considered over in the Senate because we had to squash our time down to those things that were just most important. And that one was one that allows the school systems across the state to bring into a referendum that taxes senior citizens 65 or older, that allows them to pay only half of their school tax. And this was something that had no opposition. The school systems had no opposition, and again, it came out of the House unanimously and went over to the Senate. We have to start all over with that one. It was one that was popular. It was one that gave the authority to the school systems themselves, and they would have the authority, not a mandate, but the authority to bring this up for a vote in the local areas. That was constitutional amendment. Our waivers, our medical waivers, have been approved a couple of weeks ago. That's going to help every Georgian when it comes to health care and the cost of health insurance. That is a very, very big deal. I want to talk a little bit about the interchange. For those that are familiar with this, we've worked on that. Some of the folks like Jimmy Burnsit and all the mayors of Richmond Hill have really worked on this thing for decades, and we've always run into a problem. Last year, as you might know, actually, whenever we had Governor Deal there, we had several folks that came in with a public-private partnership, if you will, with Rayonier, the county, and the city. And we, after being told no again by the Department of Transportation on this interchange, we took a different approach. We decided whenever everybody came up after their meeting with DOT, we said, let's just go see the governor. We did. And we told the governor that this was vital to the ports and their continued expansion and growth. And he agreed. So we put this on the STIP list, which got it approved. And you're within just a few weeks now of having this interchange open. It's going to change the face of Bryan County, specifically on Richmond Hill. And I really want to thank Jimmy Burnsit and Harold Fowler for not backing down and staying the course, if you will, to make sure that we've got both new residential area on one side of the road and commercial, and industrial area on the other side. It'll be developed, for those of you that have seen the master plan, since all the landowner there is going to be Rayonier. It'll be developed very similar to Skidaway Island, a very, very slow development, a very methodical development, and not an overrun, which is what we had in Pooler, if you will. The layout for the roundabouts are beautiful, and of course the people that are going to be moving here, there'll be some very, very, very nice houses built to specifications according to the county, which is a big deal. And of course the ports will have, there's already development going on over there, as you can ride by on the going south on the right side of the road. It's explosive over there because they have rail and they will have the interchange there within a few weeks. It's a very big deal for the county, and we'll be having a groundbreaking and a dedication there. That bridge will be known as the Fowler Burnsit Bridge, and the interchange will be known as the Jimmy Burnsit interchange. Those two guys worked very, very hard on getting that done. So very proud of doing that, very proud of getting it done. The ports is busting at the seams. Thank God. In the state, we've got three major economic engines, as you know, for jobs across the state. One of them is the World Congress Center. They basically have been shut down with their massive tourism piece in downtown Atlanta. They've been basically shut down, and of course the busiest airport in the world there in Atlanta has been off considerably, and it's going to be off for a while longer as more and more people decide, or more people since March have decided not to fly. So that two of the three have basically been massively hit, along with the tourism industry, which is coming back a good bit in Savannah and on the coastal areas. But the one that really has not taken the hit that we, thank goodness that we thought it might was the Georgia ports. They've held steady. They've only had one downturn, a slight downturn in August, I believe. And all the rest of the time, they're busting at the seams. We're building to meet the need. We're building lots of warehouses across the counties. And when you say the ports, you're not just looking at warehouses in Chatham. They are, in Bryan County's case, both ends, I-16 and I-95. So Bryan County is blessed to have two interstates, one end, which is very unusual. And of course, Liberty County and others, but Bryan is the next logical step. So business is good. Our revenue's up in the state, even with the pandemic. Our governor had a backbone and came back and said we're not gonna close our state. We're going to keep people working. And he took a lot of hits on that, and it was the right move. And we're positioned correctly for the upcoming session to not have to go in and cut teacher pay raises or teacher pay at all, and because our revenues are up. So it's going to make it very, very easy for us to get through this session. As you might know, the serum is going to be out within about a couple of weeks, probably before Christmas, as we begin to distribute the COVID vaccine. We will have at least two companies that will be distributing those. They're already ready to go, and all they have to do, one of them, Moderna, is supposed to be, I believe it was just approved for their emergency vaccine. So it's coming out, and we'll begin to distribute those in a hurry. Dr. Watson, Senator Watson, was one of the, as chairman of that health committee over the Senate, was part of that that study, if you will, and he actually got in a double-blind study, he got the actual vaccine. So there's a lot going on. It's filmed this year. Last year, of course, it's still busting open. They're back to work. They're doing well. They've done some while the campaign was going on. They were filming some stuff down close to Fort McAllister. So all over the place, the film is doing well. We're going to start auditing them more. We've kind of been lax on that. So if there's any fraud and abuse going on, we hope to fix that instead of killing the goose that laid the golden egg. So we'll be auditing these to make sure they're entitled to that 30% tax credit, and we'll continue to get a lot of investment in that area. And I think now, and the last thing, of course, as we go into next year, everybody's eyes are going to be on redistricting. We're going to, as soon as the session's over, we'll have another special session to redraw the district lines. That always is, I've gone through two of these. My district numbers I've had started with District 150, then 123, now 164. So I'll have another one. I'll have a total of 4 district numbers, which will change in this by the time that I get through the middle of the next session. Bryan County is amazingly situated perfectly for all the good things that are coming to coastal Georgia. And of course, I support it. Speaking of coastal Georgia, I support all of your initiatives, our natural resources. I'm out here looking at the water right now. It's beautiful, and I want to make sure that all of our natural resources are safe for my grandchildren and your grandchildren and others. So that's very high on my priority list. We'll be opening up the oystering along some of the intercoastal waterways, off the intercoastal waterways in the estuaries. And like I say, coastal Georgia is very well situated to do well. As you might know, I'm the dean of the delegation because I'm old, for the coastal delegation, which is everyone in the House and Senate districts for the 1st Congressional District. So all the way down to the Jacksonville line, all the way over to Moultrie. So with anybody that's in this congressional district, I just chair our committee. Our issues are so much different than the ones that are in Atlanta and North Georgia. We in the coastal area are unique when it comes to that, and believe me, we hang together. We'll be going back and adding a representative, used to be there when I first got there. Buddy DeLoach used to live in Hinesville, now lives out in Darien. We'll be adding him as our coastal member. And we have a new senator that'll be taking over from Senator Ligon down in the Brunswick area. So things have changed a little bit, and we'll be adding a new representative here in Savannah, which took over from Craig Gordon, who decided not to run again. So our coastal delegation is strong. We all believe every one of the issues that you've got on your chamber list. But I just thought I'd stop and open it up for anybody that wanted to interchange a little bit.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions, but I'll go ahead and let everyone know if you have any questions for Representative Stevens, go ahead and put them in the chat box and I will happily read them out for you. A couple questions that we have just before the call. Georgia was recently named the #1 state for business for the 8th year in a row by Site Selection Magazine, which is such an unprecedented accomplishment. What types of legislation or initiatives do you foresee in the coming year to help ensure Georgia retains its #1 spot on the list? And how has that been affected, if at all, by the pandemic?
Very good question. And of course, this was laid in the groundwork. We try to do things that get out of the way of business, especially when it comes to regulation. I can remember back in one of the hardest things that are deals that took our that was an impediment to business was sales tax on manufactured goods. We had a lot of our manufacturers just left Georgia. So we eliminated that sales tax on energy for manufactured good, and a lot of these folks came back and they're doing well. And of course, what I didn't say is I also chair the subcommittee on Ways and Means, which is the tax policy writing committee, and I carry a whole lot of bills since I chair the committee. But the things that get out of the way of business that help streamline business are the things that get our attention. One of them, as you might recall, a few years ago was a $4 billion expense to the state, if you will. It was a revenue hit, a fiscal note. And it was a single factor tax on business. And what we did is we said that, or before we did this, is there were 3 ways that you could be taxed. And that was if you hired more employees, you paid a tax. If you put a capital investment, you paid a tax. And then if you paid, and of course, if your sales increased, of course, you paid a tax. We felt like that was way too cumbersome, so we eliminated all that and we came down to just a single factor sales tax on consumption. It was expensive, but we made it back within 1 year. So it was a leap of faith, if you will, to do that kind of stuff. And it's those eliminations of just getting government out of the way that allows innovation for business to get done. So that Georgia will remain to be the #1 state to do business. And it is because of these barriers to business that we keep eliminating. One that I'd like to see gone, and we've tried so hard over a number of years. We're the only state in the South that taxes inventory on business and as an ad valorem tax. And I'd like to see that gone. I've introduced several bills. It's expensive to the state, and we've nibbled around the edges by creating free ports, if you will, that allows you to go into a certain area that the local municipalities can create. And it's to their best interest to do it so that you give up the tax on inventory on the one hand, and you also allow for business to expand on the other, which is one of the reasons we've got Amazon here in Fort Wentworth and others. So the free ports is a big deal. I'd like to see it gone. It is, in my mind, it's the largest impediment to small business that we have.
Thank you. One other question. Given that the 2020 legislative session will only be 40 days and it's constitutionally required that a balanced budget is passed, how much time do you think there will be to spend on other legislation? And if pieces of legislation have to be prioritized due to condensed nature of the session, what do you think the priorities outside of the budget will be?
The budget's the number one issue. I can tell you the first week back in there, we're going to play some. I'm reluctant to say too much because I don't want to give the other side a whole lot of a heads up, but we're going to make some changes in the absentee ballot law, and of course that's where that resides solely on the shoulders of the Secretary of State. Um, all of us believe that a person that comes to vote and is forced to have a valid Georgia ID ought to be required when you vote absentee that you have a valid Georgia ID. So we're looking at ways to do that. The chairman of the Committee on Governmental Affairs is looking at several recommendations that'll come together as a piece of bill or as a bill, and I think you're probably going to see that early in the session. And of course, the other side is going to say we're trying to suppress voters, but we believe that every legal vote of a resident of the area ought to have the opportunity to vote, but you ought to prove that you are who you say you are.
Thank you. And then what sort of legislation do you anticipate may be debated and or passed related to tourism this year?
Good question. You know, in Savannah, I talked to Michael Owens the other day, and tourism is coming back. It's I would like to see, and for years, as you might know, we spend less in the state of Georgia than any other state when it comes to tourism advertising. So I'd like to see something with a dedicated revenue source, or maybe a designated. We can't dedicate in Georgia except for constitutional. A designated source of revenue so that we can advertise these beautiful things that we've got in the state. And we've got so many jewels all over the state from one end to the other, more than any other. You know, in Florida, it's a huge budget piece for them. And looking for a way to designate money to advertise our state throughout is a big deal. And, you know, this pandemic is going to change. And so people are going to become more at ease and traveling again, especially our own citizens. So we've all got these gems in our state that I'd like for them to see. The Ford area down there, I think, is going to develop into more of a tourism destination than people believe, and a great stop-off point whenever they're trying to see things in the area. But it for me, that first piece of legislation and getting a designated source of revenue would be nice.
Yes, speaking of our tourism, Christy Sherman's done a great job with all of our Visit Richmond Hill and the new museum and whatnot, or the new bakery visitor center. So one other question that I've received, and then I don't have any, so if you thought of any, go ahead and put them in for me. But this question, we're fortunate to have 2 pharmacists and a doctor from this district. How do you envision the COVID-19 vaccine will be applied? Do you think people will go to their primary care doctor, or will it be a public drive-through event, perhaps at the health department? If you're over 60 and have underlying health conditions, how will you present yourself for the shot?
Good question. As you might know, these vaccines have to be stored at like -70 degrees, which is we don't have anything currently to store the vaccine. So there'll be dry ice, of course, employed here. So, but it's my understanding now they want to get it out. 102 years ago, whenever we had the great pandemic of the flu, you know, that was a big deal whenever people were dropping as they typically are now. And so they're going to want to get it out to every available distributor that they can, whether it be in the medical offices, it's going to be public health, but you're also going to see pharmacies using this stuff as well, because you want to get as many people vaccinated as possible. That's, of course, number one, that's willing to be vaccinated, and number two, to get this stuff under control as much as we can. So it's going to be within the next couple of weeks, and they're working on all that stuff now, the distribution of this vaccine. But I think it's going to be every medical outlet they can possibly get it to. We don't want to eliminate any possibility of somebody not getting the vaccine if they so choose.
I thought of one more question since we still have a couple minutes. Is there any discussion on adding pandemic funding and with the school district and kind of holding them harmless for the temporary drops in enrollment when reporting full-time students during the school year with determining the future QBE allotments? Has that kind of come up at all for this next session or anything to do with that?
The past couple of years, I know that it's been a priority. For the first time since the 80s, we fully funded QBE. And I'm sure there's going to be conversation as we move forward to make sure that the schools get the funding that they're required. But that's probably all that I know about it, except that since the 1980s, we've never, whenever QBE came about, I believe it was 84, it's never been fully funded until we got there. What I would rather see, and what I hope that we focus on rather than fully funding QBE, is that we look at the formula. It's outdated, and that in itself, I believe, would help the problem of getting the funds to the schools. You know, okay. I will say, since one more thing is as we talk about this pandemic and the COVID scenario that we're in, I believe you're going to see a relatively, because we've changed our the way that we come up and meet people, I think you're going to see a relatively small flu season. There's, you know, people don't come up and shake hands like they used to anymore, and it's become commonplace whenever you go into a public area to wear a mask. That was not the case whenever, and you know, 62,000 people die every year from the flu. So the flu was a very big deal. But we've gotten used to washing our hands and not shaking hands. I think that's going to carry into the flu season. So if I had a prognostication to make, I think it's going to be a light flu season as a result of people doing the smart things. I can tell you in the Capitol, if I didn't shake 100 hands a day, you know, I'm not doing much as far as seeing people. But because of the way that our social distancing and we've become very aware, if there is a good side effect to this pandemic, we've become aware that the spread of any kind of germ is by doing the proper things can be curtailed dramatically. So just a side note.
Well, good. Well, I don't have any other questions, so I at this time will conclude our call. But Representative Stevens, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with our members and the things that I'm looking forward to a new year. Puts a lot of pressure on a new year, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully with the vaccine and everything else coming out, we'll continue to move forward. Again, want to thank you for all that you've done for Bryan County, and again, congratulate you on your reelection. So at this time, I will end the call and hope to see you on Thursday as we hear from Congressman Carter. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys very much.
Thanks.